Warning, the following podcast is brought to you by dads who are still figuring out how to fold a fitted sheet. Welcome to the All Pro Dad Podcast.
Hey, this is the All Pro Dad Podcast. I'm Ted Lowe, and father of four, and today I'm joined with BJ Foster, father of two, and we're also very excited to be joined by father of three, Dr. Chap Clark. Chap, welcome.
It's great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
I love it. Chap is the Vice Dean of Regional Campuses and Master's Program in School of Theology, and Professor of Youth, Family, and Culture at Fuller Theological Seminary. He's a speaker and a trainer and a consultant, and is the author of 18 books, including Hurt Inside the World of Today's Teenagers and Deep Ministry in a Shallow World. Chap was on staff with Young Life for 15 years as an area and regional director. Chap, BJ and I we're fighting to see who's the biggest Chap Clark fan. Tell us a little bit about your family before we dive in.
Well, I got three kids. I'm married to a therapist. I got a daughter who's not shy as a therapist. I got a son who's a social worker. I got another son that tells me he's the theologian in the family. And I'm tenured, but that has no bearing in what I get to do around here. So there you go. That's my family.
You're the low man on the totem pole in your family. That's what I'm hearing.
I'm holding them all up. That's how I look at it.
Well, Chap, I was on Young Life staff, and I sat under a course that you taught for a week on Intro to Adolescence, and ever since then, I've admired your work so much. You changed the way that I have approached kids, particularly teenagers, but kids in general, and it's given me a lot of insight. And I think ultimately this podcast, everybody got tired of me quoting you so much. They were like, why don't we just have this guy on? Because all BJ keeps talking about is Chap Clark says this and Chap Clark says that.
Oh, man, you need to expand your horizon, brother. Just saying.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But so it's great to have you. And so today, the big question that we're tackling with Dr. Chap Clark is what do dads need to know about today's kids?
The first thing is we are literally all living virtual lives, and especially your children, your kids. But it's not just kids. We have so many different relationships, so many different expectations that it's very difficult to develop a core sense of self as you grow up. We know 20 years ago that adolescence really lasted into the mid-20s. It's like we fixate on so many things that don't really matter much, and we ignore the stuff that matters so much. And we just have so many different relationships, and we got so many different expectations. Well, that's true of you if you're 40 or whatever. But if you're 16 or 12 or 23 and you're trying to figure out how do you live your life, you really can't do the most important job to become an adult, and that is to develop the inner self and to build the core of who you are and who you're going to be with power and strength so that you can impact the world for good. And so we all have our avatars, multiple avatars. So we're scrambling. And your kids, that's what they're doing. That's how they're living their life. They're living their life on the outside. That was true 20 years ago, much more so now. And these are multiple selves that create their own personality. That leads to the second layer of this concentric circles going in is kids today are mosaic thinkers instead of linear thinkers. I don't know if you've noticed this, but to get them to actually concentrate on something for more than 10 seconds is very, very difficult.
Great.
But there's some great research out there, but almost nobody, unfortunately, in the Western world is actually studying this. Because just before the war in Ukraine, the people that were doing the most work on this were the Baltic states and Ukrainians, because they had their educational system that was really focused on what are our future kids going to be like. True of the Russian scholars, too. This was in 2017, 18, 19, 20. And so I picked up on that, and a few of my former students are. But the idea of mosaic thinking now is for every avatar, I got to create a self, because I can't sustain that when I'm online or when I'm in math or when I'm in soccer practice. So I got to create a self. So I got to have a way of thinking. So I grab all these Mosaic titles of data, pull them together, and throw them into that avatar. So for every avatar, I have a whole series of way I see life and think about life. The problem is when I jump to the next one, I have a whole different series. It's like a 3-year-old creating a mosaic. It's nonsensical. This is why people will say one thing in one setting and something completely contradictory in another, and they'll fight to the death for both of those views.
So there's an avatar. A kid will have an avatar at school, and then they'll have an avatar maybe at church. They'll have an avatar with mom and dad, an avatar with grandma, grandpa. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and not only at school, there's 5 or 6 different social groupings at school, and then every single class is a different avatar because there's different expectations, there's different roles to play.
Wow.
And they can't control it. They're not aware of it. They just know they got to bounce.
Okay.
Wow.
And would you say that these avatars are authentic, or are they just making up? Are they making up a
making
shell?
up is a logical, predetermined awareness kind of concept. That's not what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's simply, I got to survive, and here's a person in front of me, or here's a group on TikTok, or here's somebody sitting next to in class, and I got to be somebody next to that person, or I just completely shut down. And some kids do, by the way, many more than did 20 years ago when you were in my class, PJ. Mm-hmm. The problem with Mosaic thinking is it's not kids' fault that they're so random and so quick and so defensive and so and shut down whenever we're trying to challenge anything or even have a conversation. It's so hard for them. I'm going to come to an answer for this, by the way, but then the third layer underneath that is this is the most transactional we've ever been as human beings in the world we live in now. It's like almost every relationship, every setting, and let's just talk about teenagers now. And this applies to young adults and children as well. But it's like, boy, you're great. I like you a lot, and I like you more if you kick that extra point. They don't ever say that,
right?
But they clearly act like it because if you miss the extra point, high school football coach. Actually, this is a big part of my research over the years. 50 years ago, you ask them what they do for a living. I build men. I build young men. I have the great privilege of walking with them, using the environment of football in order to help them to become better guys. And when you hear people talk about people like Andy Reid and others like that, there's still residue of that at that level. But you take it down to high school, you take it down to elementary school, sports, music, drama, church, school, grandparents, you just go down the list. Everything in their experience is transactional. I got to perform my way into blessing or I will be left behind.
Wow.
And this is a transactional world where, I got a lot of therapists in my family who continue to tell me stuff like all the stories about this stuff. So when you got multiple avatars and you can have these mosaic ways of thinking about life, but it's not integrated. And this is even for us. And then it's transactional. You are always having to figure out how to make sure you stay in the game of whatever the game happens to be in front of you, which forces you on the interior work you got to do, which you just don't have the time, energy, or training or encouragement to become a person, is you become more and more isolated. This is pre-COVID. This was the most isolated generations, millennials as well as Gen Z at the time before COVID, that felt the greatest sense of isolation in history from anything we know, from going back, way back. And then COVID obviously exacerbated everything for everybody. I mean, we're all more isolated than we were 10 years ago, by far. But this isolation drives us into what's now called the loneliness epidemic. That is not limited to teenagers. It's for everybody. I think the loneliest people that I've ever encountered are people who are guys are more lonely than women, but they're less able to recognize it, much less admit it. Feeling much more isolated when they allow themselves to go down those roads. So they don't allow themselves. So they allow themselves to get really upset or really dive into, whether it's sports or politics or neighbors or their kids, and the crushing weight of multiple selves, multiple avatars, all these mosaic things where I can't really figure out what I think at a deep level and be constructive so I can invite other people to teach me. I don't know how to relate to people that are always judging me on a transactional level. I feel isolated and I'm so lonely, but I got no place to take it. Okay. Now, guys, if you're listening to this, I am talking to you, but for this podcast, you got to take care of your stuff to be a decent dad or granddaddy to your kids. I come from Tennessee stock, okay? So I'm
granddaddy, yeah.
But I got to tell you, our kids are desperate for somebody who's healthy and whole and does their work so that they have a place where they could just go. And that's okay. There you go.
Well,
so it's been a great time. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Can we back up for a sec? Because I want to dive into, because all of this, you went really to the guts right away, which is fantastic.
I hope that's okay.
No, it's absolutely okay. And I want to come back to it, but I want to give a little bit of insight. Just one of the things that I've heard you talk about is just the process that kids go through from early adolescence, mid-adolescence, and then late adolescence. And I thought it might be helpful to give our audience an understanding of the unique characteristics of what's happening with a kid in middle school, unique characteristics of what happens with a kid in high school, and then kind of beyond as they move into their 20s. Can you talk about those kind of the unique...
singing my song, brother. Nobody asked me that one anymore. But it's really crucial because people don't understand how the brain works in the midst of all this social chaos that we're all in. And a child, until they're roughly 10 years old, is very concrete. They just take in bits of data, but it's not cognitive data. It's not words so much as it's experiences. That words are attached to experiences and facial expressions, and whether or not they got pulled off the field because they dropped a baseball, you know, all the stuff. Well, that's how they store that. They store it all in their brain, and it's very concrete. So when you ask a 7-year-old, why did you do that? They don't have any idea. So they got to figure out what's the best possible answer to make sure I don't get in trouble for this thing. But they're not that savvy. So, up until about 10. Then from about 10 to 14, they enter what's called early adolescence. And this is a time when the brain shifts to prepare for adulthood, the abstraction of adulthood. It's kind of like when up until your time, and this is true until you're about 14, is you're driving a car, video game, and you're first person. So you can't see anybody behind you or next to you. That's how you see life, right there. And then you hit about 10 to 14, and this is really funny, but the scholar Daniel Siegel and his team down at UCLA, they described this period of your middle school kid, of your fifth grader to roughly ninth grade, as the use it or lose it period, where anything that you think is going to be important for you to decide to survive right now, you're going to grab onto it and keep it. You're going to hold on to that little thing in your brain. Anything that you think is absolutely doesn't matter, you do everything you can to just erase it. So therefore, the stupidest thing we ever did was to create middle schools. Because the brain of kids, especially boys, girls are more social, so they're more adaptive to their environment. They're still going through that too. And it's like they're just trying to clear out space so they can get into abstract abilities to connect the dots and go to third person view. But so be kind to your middle school kid. Most of the time what they're saying, they have no idea what they're talking about. They're just trying to wake up tomorrow and go, what synapses do I count on today? Yeah, that's really going on. And especially boys, because they don't have the social abilities yet. That will be really stifled when they get older. That's early adolescence. Then the brain starts to shift to abstraction, and this is true across all of time, as best we know. About 14 years old, 14 to 15, right around ninth grade, where you start becoming aware that there's other people in the world besides you. And you've got to figure out how to interact with them. That's what happens. Now, what you were taught, BJ, was much more about kind of a linear process. This is what I used to teach before the cultural pivot really kicked in high, where it's a linear process. And from 14 to 18, you really grow up a whole heck of a lot. The reality is that's not what's happening so much, because mid-adolescence itself is a period of great transition. Because of the cultural pivot, the last 10 years, all the characteristics of mid-adolescence where I really don't know who I am, so I got to be somebody for everybody. That now lasts into the early 20s, where you're fully interdependent, you're integrated, you say and know what you believe, you can be trustworthy and trusted and trust others. Well, that is emergent adulthood, where you're kind of stuck. And this is what's going on with the mid-20s to almost 40 years old. For so many, it's almost like until you're around 40, and it's different for everybody. And there's a whole lot of different factors that go into play. But the idea of this thing's lengthened, where you eventually, hopefully, you finally got to land and be an integrated whole person. And so that what you were taught has now expanded so significantly because of the cultural pivot. So that 17-year-old kid's not trying to manipulate. They're not that integrated yet. They're simply trying to survive that particular avatar, parent, coach, whoever. There you go.
Well, and you had talked about
a lot of stuff I'm loading on you guys. I know.
No, I love it. In Hurt, you talked a lot about systemic abandonment. And that was primarily millennials that had experienced it. Can you explain systemic abandonment? And then does it exist anymore? Is it gone? Has it gotten worse?
I love that, because everybody now butchers it, says systematic. No, that's intentional. Systemic means the systems are doing that. We've abandoned our responsibility to care for the next generation of kids as a culture. And then you take it down to all the different systems, whether it's sports, religion, school, family, doesn't matter what it is. Those systems have not only neglected their responsibility to literally be there for kids, but abandoned their responsibility. I call it systemic abandonment. Nobody talks about this anymore, because now we're celebrating the disillusion of our connectedness.
So it's gotten worse. So you feel like it's gotten worse.
Way worse. And even the tribalism that we're in is not real tribalism, because it's not based on the core people. It's based on viewpoints that are my avatars that I'm holding on to for my own sense of self. And as soon as somebody from my tribe violates that, then they're gone. So in other words, we lack social capital even with each other within our political, ideological church tribes.
Mm-hmm. So you've got millennials who've kind of grown up under,
they're the 40 and younger, yeah.
Right. And they've grown up under the abandoned. I mean, they were the abandoned, right? And so has it affected, from what you're witnessing, it sounds like they're kind of just continuing it on. In fact, maybe even getting worse, or maybe just even as it's gotten worse, they've been affected, and there's,
I would say the latter. I would say the second, because people aren't doing this intentionally. They're not wanting to do this. Mm-hmm. They just are part of a social tsunami that's affected everybody. And I see where you're going. So let me tell you something. I was doing an article for a counseling magazine about a year ago. And I got 3 days. I'm going to go to Chipotle, and I'm going to sit there for 3 hours and drink my Arnold Palmers, and and about 8 or 10 of these high school junior, I think, girls came in, and they happened to sit right next to me, and I'm going, good. I like distraction when I'm writing. And they sat down, and they're just typical high school girls. And then about 10 minutes into it, I noticed something. There was only one person at a time talking. There was not a single cell phone that was in anybody's hand. They were on the tables, but nobody picked up a cell phone. And this magazine said, "Dude, would you write on loneliness for emerging generations? Because we really want to tell people how horrible it is for kids, and you're good at that. You write books called Hurt, and you hate kids, so go." So I'm trying to do one more outline of one more old chap. The world's, sky's falling. And I see these girls, and they're listening to each other, and they're interacting with each other, and they're laughing with a joyful banter of connectedness to one another. And the more I'm sitting there, the more I started scratching on some of my notes. And I just noticed that these girls literally had broken a trend with each other and said, "Screw this, I'm gonna love my friends." And so I changed the article and I sent it in. I go, "You may not like it, but I call it the power of belonging." The power of belonging has the ability to break through all of these artificial attacks that the human spirit has the ability to overcome. Would we but just rise above and begin to look around, and literally empathy and compassion. Empathy is where I get inside somebody else's skin so that I can walk with them and we share the journey together. And these girls, nobody had to tell them to be empathetic, compassionate. They just had a joy of being together. And I wrote this article. So I've been talking about the power of belonging the last 6 months or so, a lot more often, you guys. And dads, you can create that in your marriage, in your family. If you and your wife, if you're still married, talk about it. Regardless of all the circumstances that beat you down, all it takes is doing your own work, reflection, get some decent relationships around you, and make sure you, especially if your kids and grandkids, invite them in. Sorry. Yeah, you got me preaching. I was a pastor.
No, Chap, let me ask you. When you've said a couple of times, we've got to do our own work. To dads listening, dad's going a million miles an hour, taking kids baseball, all the different things. What does that mean in a real practical sense for a dad to do his own work?
When you feel anything inside that causes, that is triggering anger, fear, anxiety, you mostly push that out in anger or frustration. But underneath that is pay attention to that. The most important thing adults can do now is to stop the cycles and pay more careful attention to what's really going on, not only outside of ourselves, but inside of ourselves. That's the first step. And for most of us, we may need to get another person to help us to explore what that's about on the inside. And guys are so afraid of exposing even to themselves pain, failure, fear of failure, transfer. So when their kid doesn't do so well, or their kid isn't treated good on the athletic field or whatever, that brings up so much from the inside. And if we do not acknowledge that, we're going to do great damage to our kids and miss out on the most amazing blessing that growing older offers if you have the opportunity for having grandchildren. Because unless you are integrated and you deal with your stuff, grandkids are not going to get close to you. And the greatest joy I got is when those 5 little critters are sitting around me and telling me the truth about me. "Oh, granddaddy, why don't you don't have any eyebrows. You got 2 that are actually falling into your eye right now." I mean, oh my gosh, who wouldn't weep over that 3-year-old?
I love it.
That's what I mean by doing your own work. I know enough about counseling. I've trained enough counselors, but Dee and Katie for sure would say that it's like 70 to 80% of the men that come in for marital counseling just refuse to be honest. And with even themselves. And you kind of go, I understand why women are bailing on marriages after 20, 25 years. That's what I mean by doing your own work. Guys lack such incredible courage, especially the ones that are mean and macho. Guys that have this innate ability to buy into this thing that we got to be strong on the outside to pass that on to our boys. Our boys need to see strength and compassion and inner power that is used for the betterment of people in society. I mean, to be a strong man is not what all the Christian literature says it is. Exactly the opposite of that. I imagine you guys get into that some. But, I mean, your friend Jim Burns would be, to me, a prototypical example of the kind of dad with great power and husband. Absolutely. But his power is so harnessed by his compassion.
Yeah.
For the dad who's listening to this, who's, gets home and their kids walk through the door, practically speaking, what is that? How does that dad change the way he interacts with his kids? How does he take this information? He's got a kid that's walking in that's dealt with feeling transactional relationships all day long, feeling like he or she has to perform or live up to a certain standard. How does that dad then enter in? What are some practical ways that dad can enter in with his kids? Is it empathy? Is it just modeling these things? A dad can work on his stuff, but sometimes that can take years to get, what is that? How does that dad enter in with his kids?
Well, my dad didn't really enter in. Good guy, very successful business guy. But I had a mentor when I was in graduate school who had just recently been divorced, just newly married, and he said I'd come home and I would still be thinking about my day. And now I'd be on podcasts or, audiobooks or whatever it is I do, or making phone calls all the way home. So I'd still be in my day. And he goes, and I realized it destroyed my marriage. It destroyed my kids because I'd walk in still in my space. And he goes, I realized that once I got in the car to go home, I had to exit my space and prepare myself to enter into the needs of the others that I come alongside. And this is before I met Dee. So, we're in our 45th year of marriage, and there's not a day that at some point I go through that exercise. So a couple of things. First of all, dads, don't force it. Don't try to force your kid into a relationship that you haven't really built organically. And don't try to push your kid into being what you want to be for the relationship. And you got to be yourself, of course. So be kind to yourself, but take a count of 5, deep breath. What's the space my child needs in order to be relieved of some of this stuff that they've experienced all day? And how can I simply be a presence of hope and belonging to my kid in my personality, my stuff, my whatever? Be kind to yourself, but just take a 5 count and just read the room. If you learn to read the room with your kids and you learn when to slow down, back off, if you're married, invite your partner to help you to figure out where you might have some blind spots there. And it's not a whole lot of hard work. It's really about just kind of breathing deep and letting go. That's what I'd share with you, BJ.
Yeah. I think that's a hard thing for dads, because I think we want to control so many things, because when we let go, we feel out of control, and that brings stress and everything else.
And that control comes from a lack of what's inside. It's our own fear and anxiety.
Right.
And you know what? Dude, you guys are looking at the A1, all pro, Hall of Fame controller. Okay. And I've had to deal in depth with all three of our kids as they've moved into adulthood over my humorous but manipulative self for environments and fear for them. And it's really fear for me. It's not much fear for them. It's more fear for me. And, but gosh.
Chap, give me an example of, let's say you've got a 12-year-old. When you said you're the chief of controllers, you've got a 12-year-old. Give us an example of what control looked like when Chappie was 12 and what you would go back and do differently.
An example for him is when he would get a little upset, instead of me trying to read what was triggering his upsetness and what would be the best way to help him navigate that, I would be more concerned of his impact on me or on D, especially when he'd take on his mom. And that's a dynamic that is really tough because most of the time our wives, are way stronger than we give them credit for, and we got to protect them from our kids. It's really the opposite. I think a lot of the times is they need to protect our kids from us because we want to protect our kids from our wives. And so an example of a 12-year-old of talking back to his mom. Okay, what's that? Ask the question, what's that about? Every behavior, every attitude, every word out of a kid's mouth has a reason for it. What is going on underneath that over the next 15 years as I'm parenting that kid, how am I going to help my kid navigate what's underneath that so the behaviors are under control? They won't go away. But that's the biggest thing because Chap used to just go nuts sometimes. And then I would overreact and that would make it absolutely worse. And
you've been at my house,
which was very rare because she's a most dear, wonderful person and still incredibly close to all three kids. And I am too now. But when she'd lose it, then I knew, Armageddon has arrived.
Yeah.
AI has actually taken over in the other one. So that helped, Ted? I mean,
it does. I would say the worst parenting I ever did is when I was trying to protect their mom. I mean, honestly, because I'd come in, you're not going to talk to my wife that way. Someone told me that statement once and I just latched on. You're not going to talk to my wife this way, which there's some truth to that, but it just made the situation worse. I wouldn't even ask what was going on. I'd come in and so I think, especially that's such a powerful question. What's going on underneath that, especially when a kid is trying to deal with who am I? I've got 5 avatars. I don't even know where I am right now in this moment to really start digging underneath that and saying, what's going on there? That's a powerful question.
And not rhetorically, because remember, even up until their late teens at least, they cannot explore why they're acting out, what they're feeling.
We have to figure it out.
Yes.
We've got to figure it out. We got to ask the questions to figure it out because they can't. Where their frontal lobe.
Yeah, and read the room and try to sense what's going to soften this and provide a space for the kid, but not allow them to be destructive at the same time. That's the dance now. So.
That's good. That's good. Well, Chap, BJ, any more questions? Because I know if we let this guy go without I know you've got a question you're sitting on.
No, I was just.
You guys are great. Thank you for letting me just go after this stuff. I love talking about this, so I appreciate you both.
Well,
Thanks.
I love listening. I was more just kind of thinking about the pro move. We always end every episode with a pro move, like what they do. And as I was thinking about the things that you were talking about, I'd love for you to weigh in. I did ask you, how do we enter in? But as you were talking, the whole question of asking yourself the question, what's below the surface of how my kid is behaving and what they're saying, which, by the way, takes a lot more energy than just going, stop doing that.
You and I have talked about that. We're pros
to actually stop and think about all that stuff takes a lot more work and a lot more time But it sounds like, from what you're saying and from what my experience is, it'll make a huge difference in the long game. So if you don't do it, then you're going to make more problems in the long run that you're going to have to deal with. So we might as well spend our energy. So I was just kind of thinking about the pro move. When your kid is whatever your kid's behavior is, whatever they're saying, think through what's below the surface of that. And we need to figure that out. They can't. Do you guys disagree with that pro move, or do you have a different one?
Chap, is that our pro move? Because we want to give, we've given guys a lot of content, a lot of things to think about. If you did just leave them with one thing today, the dad's going to walk in tonight, what would it be?
I think that's it. The more unflappable we are with compassion, and taking deep breaths, that's the pro move. Yeah.
I love that.
I love unflappable, because I just kind of think the things that we model, and a lot of dads, myself including, get really reactive, and I think we don't recognize the damage that can cause.
Yeah, because I am very flappable.
Yeah,
I am very flappy.
Yeah,
I'm very flappy chappy's dad. Oh, yeah, it's so true. That's funny. That's good. Well, and Chap, I've said it on this podcast way too many times, but I wish I could go back to Young's head and say, "Hey, buddy, you need to calm down. You just need to be that calm presence in their life." I don't know. I just keep getting the image in my head of coming home with your kid and getting them off their phone and going, "Let's go outside and throw a football." I mean, at the end of the day, how do we calm down? How are we there with them? Chap, thank you for being here, friend.
The PS on that is that you just need a PS on all the pro move is great, but starting today is what matters.
Right.
You don't have to. Don't dig up all the stuff. Just today and tomorrow.
Just today.
Just today and tomorrow. It's okay, and let it take root in you, and you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be great.
Awesome. Well, Chap, thanks again, dear friend. Thank you.
Really fun to be with you guys and
Absolutely.
all you men out there. Really appreciate you all.
Absolutely. And listeners, we want to say thank you as always for joining us. We know that you and your kids will be glad that you did.
Thanks again for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. Behind every episode is our amazing team. Producer Haley Mawat, audio and video editor Buck Buchanan, and production coordinator Corey Walliff. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. So remember, if you have more questions than answers, then you're probably in the right place. See you next time.